episode, Connection, the Heart of Early Childhood podcast. My name's Katrina Gallegos, and I'm here with my co-host, Terry Tapia. Terry, how are you feeling today?
Doing well, Katrina. Just really excited to be with you for another episode of our podcast. Really like the title of this episode, How Structured Literacy is Changing the Landscape in New Mexico. So excited to learn more about this related to structured literacy and the two guests that we have. We have Rianne Herrera, who is from our Central Region Educational Cooperative, one of our colleagues, and we have Toby Soderberg, who is with the Southwest Regional Educational Cooperative. Both of them are New Mexico Structured Literacy Coordinators.
I definitely can't wait to hear more about what they have to say around structured literacy and how it is truly changing the landscape here in New Mexico. So everyone, pull up a seat, get ready, and let's listen in to see what they have to say. Rianne and Toby, thank you so much for being here with us today. So we definitely want to get to know a little bit more about both of you. And so what is your background and what led you to the field of education?
I guess I'll start. So actually I was pre-med before I went into education. In high school, I went to the Early College Academy in Albuquerque. And I was studying to be a licensed practitioner nurse. And then my goal was to go into pre-med when I went into college. But at the same time at El Dorado High School, we had a preschool there. And I was doing a lot of work through the preschool. And then the next year I went to an elementary school and taught or co-taught with a teacher there. And so I really just fell in love with working with the kids. So when I started college, I went into education. So I earned dual bachelor's in special education and elementary education. And then I proceeded to work on my master's in special education with an emphasis in gifted education, which is pretty much where I spent most of my teaching career. Twice exceptional middle schoolers were on the gifted spectrum, but also might have had other learning disabilities. Most likely, some of it was dyslexia. Autism, towards the end of the years that I taught there, I started seeing a large influx of students on the spectrum, and then was able to tailor more of a twice exceptional program specifically for students on the autism spectrum, where we were able to focus on those social communication skills. So that's what I did about 12, 13 years. And then I went into the district office at Albuquerque Public Schools, where I supported teachers teaching special education in reading, writing, math, universal design for learning, and spent the next 12 years doing that before I came to the Central Region Educational Cooperative as the structured literacy coordinator.
Now, Rianne, you have so much experience, and I love that you started it off in like pre-med and then totally shifted to education. And when you were talking about El Dorado and them having like early childhood center there, I can remember when I was at Valley High School and we had a center too. And so that's really where I had my passion to kind of come through. So to know that that's kind of where that like shift started to happen for you too is really amazing to hear that. And man, all of your experience to lead you to where you're at now. So thank you so much for sharing that with listeners. Toby, what about you?
Yeah, so thank you for having us. So my experience, I was in high school, in Deming High School. I really was focused on, I was going to be a computer engineer when I graduated, and I was fortunate. I was in band all my years throughout, and they had a program called Youth Reaching Youth, which allowed us to go into the elementary schools because at that time they didn't have teachers for art, music, and PE. And so we were able to go, and I was able to go and teach music. And after my first class of a bilingual first grade class, and teaching a song to that class in English, I came home and I was just sitting on the couch, and my mom came in and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm not going to be a computer engineer. I'm going to be a teacher." And she said, "Well, thank goodness you finally came to your senses." So she was like, "I knew you were meant to be a teacher." So I went to New Mexico State to got my undergrad in music education. And so then I came back to Deming and taught elementary music, as well was the high school assistant band director for about 7 years. And then during that time, I moved into being the beginning band director and choir teacher. And throughout that time, I got my educational leadership license from Western New Mexico University. And, I thought I was just in love with teaching, going to always be teaching. And then life happens and a change needed to happen within me. And that happened to be moving into a language arts position. So I kind of took a non-traditional route. Most generally, people take a core subject and then they move into the fun stuff. I went the opposite route, and language arts was just as fun. And so I spent 3 years teaching sixth grade language arts, and then had the opportunity to move into an assistant principal job for a couple of years. And then I was fortunate to get the principal position at the elementary school that I started teaching at. So a nice kind of round circle moment is my mom was the first third grade class that actually started in that elementary school. And so it was neat to come around and be the principal of my mom's elementary school. So I did that for 5 years. During that time, got my second master's in reading in TESOL from Eastern New Mexico University, and then got my PhD at NMSU in curriculum and instruction. Now, and I've even told Ryan this in conversations, now looking back, why this is so impactful and the work that we're doing with literacy is so impactful for me now is because every night I used to watch my mom read this medical textbook over and over and over and over and over, and she'd read the same pages, sometimes for months. And it was because she herself struggled with comprehension. And so my mom, I know in school had, special classes that would support her in her reading and in that comprehension. So just seeing that struggle, I just see that even as adults, we still have that struggle, and how important if we can get all of our kids and support our students and being able to be literate at an earlier age instead of having to struggle when they're adults. So.
Oh my goodness, Toby. My heart just feels so warm right now, just after listening to that full circle and where you kind of started, thinking about that engineering side and how you shifted into, that music world and really supporting children through music. And then how you switched into language art. You're right. Usually it's kind of the opposite way that people normally go. I was thinking about
Yeah.
my husband. He was preschool and then he went in to be a PE teacher. Usually it's opposite, but it's neat that
Right.
you went that way, just all the different pieces that you went through, right? Those are the different chapters in your life. One connection we have here is Terry is really good with music too. And
Nice.
she actually did our introduction for our podcast. So one time I would love to see both of you guys get together, and do something, right, Terry?
There you go. I was thinking the same thing. That nice connection, Toby. What a neat experience to have. Both of you come to us with such a varied and wide range experience in education, and also your passion for this topic comes through very clearly. So could you share with us, with our listeners this morning, what is your role as a New Mexico Structured Literacy Coordinator? What does that include? Toby, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So it's been an interesting partnership. I think in the beginning, Ryan and I didn't know exactly what we were going to expect. And so we knew it was the CREC and the Southwest, the SWREC down in Deming. And so we thought we were going to have to be two separate, but yet work together. But it's actually become this beautiful piece where we oversee a combined collective of 50 structured literacy coaches. They go out and support this year. They're supporting 72 school sites across the state of New Mexico. Part of the project that we oversee is the model and support schools in conjunction with our partnership with the New Mexico Public Education Department. Schools applied and went through a rubric process to be selected as either a support school or model school. And so our model schools, as we know in the state, are teachers, kindergarten now through fourth grade, and then we have some fifth grade and sixth grade teachers that have already been enrolled in Letters Third Edition. As they're going through that professional development, really it's how then are we supporting them in the implementation of everything that they're learning in those 2 years of that development. Really, that's the whole piece of this project is, and I think the biggest piece of this project is with the coaches, that's the work, and their support is going out to those school sites and then supporting those teachers in that implementation of that. And then Ryan, I'm going to let you jump in.
I was just going to say, and as our role as the coordinators, we support the coaches along with their professional development. And then we also coach them too. So we're coaching them in their professional goals. So we meet with them monthly on that as well. And then we also, this year, we are working with administrators as well. So we're providing them with communities of practice, providing them with more knowledge of structured literacy and helping them just think about how they can sustain that in their schools. So we do some of that as well with them.
Thank you. I appreciated Toby's comment that going into this project thinking it was going to be two separate entities, and the success of the two of you working collaboratively has made it just one. That is something in a state like ours, which is so large, right, and diverse and rural and metro, to make that happen. So thank you for sharing that.
So for our next question we have for you guys, what led the implementation of structured literacy program within the New Mexico Public Education Department for you guys?
I think really when we think about our state and where we've been, just historically, we always feel that sense of urgency of like our students just are struggling and what can we do better and how can we best support them, especially in a lot of areas, but especially in the area of literacy and reading. And so really it was that lack of reading proficiency. Another big component that was more recent was the 2018 ruling on the Gazi Martinez court case. And so just that recognition of those that fall into that low socioeconomic status, whether they're in a particular subgroup, much like special education, they're Native American in learning, and then also our English learners. In those four categories, really, we were underserving those populations in our state. And so I think that was a huge shift in what was happening. And then we have this whole nationwide wave, if you will, that's taking place of just literacy reform. And I don't even know if reform's the right word to use, but this literacy just explosion that's happening, and really realizing that we have to get back to some of those foundational pieces, being really focused on how can we support analyzing data, how can we support the work of schools and better inform our teachers and better support our teachers in the work that they have to do that sometimes seems insurmountable as we go through. So really for that, it's just caused that shift, I think, in the literacy work that we're doing in this state. I know prior to this, the work was Reads to Lead, I believe. And so this has just shifted some of that work, even though some of like that data analysis component and some of that work that was being done there is just making sure it's more systematic, explicit in the delivery of when we think building intervention supports for our students and how we're moving forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Ryan, is there anything that you're thinking about?
Toby said exactly what I would have said.
Toby, I appreciated that historical background. So, given that the department recognized this sense of urgency and also recognizing what was happening nationwide, how did the department roll this out, and what support is the state level is being provided?
Well, I'm unsure. I can't speak for how New Mexico Department of Education came to this. I know it had obviously to do with work with legislation and just the need to get kids at proficiency, but we can talk about how we've rolled out the structured literacy grant with the state. So once we had that intergovernmental contract with PED, both of the RECs are essentially managing the budget that's set forth for structured literacy. The RECs hired the two coordinators, and then we started, and then it was already in motion. And so we had to quickly hire staff last year to support the schools that were already identified as wanting the support for structured literacy. So when we started, there was already the 32 schools last year. We're going to call that our pilot year. So we had 32 schools, and then we had coaches to support that. And then we just kind of built the plane as it was on fire, it felt like at times. But we collaboratively stay in contact with New Mexico PED, with Saveto Martinez and Chrissy Cusada, and we meet with them weekly. We, collaborate with them. They're aware of the trainings that we put together for staff. They also take the trainings with us for the most part as well. So with observation feedback coaching cycles, which is the coaching model that we use along with student focused coaching, they're right there alongside us doing the work. We're thought partners throughout the process, because our main goal is, to help better supply teachers with the implementation, or the support with implementation, I should say. They've been through letters, or they're going through letters. The state has provided them with that resource and that learning experience. And then now we're just trying to take it a step further by providing them that coaching supports in their classroom, which kind of leads into what the coaches do. The coaches not only support the teachers with observation and feedback, or modeling, or lesson planning, or just being a thought partner in the process. They also work with the staff by creating, data-rich communities where they can dive into data deeper and really try to align the teachers' instructional practices with student needs, and then also supporting the head administrators, and just getting them to rethink what that equity or what structured literacy might look like in the school. So there's a lot of collaboration, I would say. They're not hands off by any means. With the model schools and the support schools this year, they have their own initiative that they're doing with iStation data. And so they're going out to the schools, they're getting kids excited and wanting to do what better. And so they're trying to motivate students and teachers to do the monthly progress monitoring in iStation, and really trying to look at those data points to drive instruction. And then they're also trying to celebrate student growth at the same time. They're working hard in other ways as well. They have a lot of initiatives going on. We're just only one initiative.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. Toby, anything you'd like to add to Ryan's response?
Ryan did a great thorough job on covering everything. And I think really it comes down to not just the rollout, but I think the partnerships that we've been able to have, like Ryan mentioned, is that observation and feedback coaching cycle. So the partnership with Priority School Bureau has been really helpful. And then again, student focused coaching. So with Dr. Daryl Mickle and his Be the Change organization that he runs, his company that he runs there. And so that has really been really great connection and just building of that support. And so it kind of lets our coaches know too that they're also not in isolation. And that's one of the things that we've learned through the process so far, is that in order to be good coaches, is we also deserve that right to have coaching. And so, you get better as a coach if you're coached. And so that's why Ryan and I really try to work hard with our coaches on meeting with them, having that targeted action plan and really moving forward and being intentional on what that focus is to support them with their support in their school site.
I'm so excited that you said that. And Terry, it just made me think like what we're doing in early childhood, right? With our coaches around practice-based coaching. They're coaching, but they also are being coached as well. It's that parallel process that's so critical for us as we are working with educators and really impacting student outcomes. But it's important for us to continue coaching. I always think about, if it's a football player, as soon as they're done, they're checking their film, they have goals for themselves, they have coaching, right? Even the best of the best have coaches. And so it's an honor to have a coach is how I feel. It's definitely an honor.
Thank you. Yes, recognizing that, I think that's one of the commonalities that is we've gotten to know Ryan and her team even more, that we're seeing that we're not working in isolation. And I appreciate both of you, how you shared your work with the public education department as a collaborative relationship as well, and working in tandem with them. And so when that happens, we see great things occur and change, don't we? So, well, thank you. Well, we appreciate, Ryan, that you spoke to the literacy coaches and their roles and how they support. So we're going to move on to another question then. What are your go-to resources that support structured literacy? Where can our listeners access these resources? So if either one of you or both of you would like to speak to that, please.
It's kind of like, where do we start with the resources? Because there's so many.
Good. We'd like to hear that.
So one that's been an initiative, and I'm sure Ryan will jump in and probably talk a little more about it because I will probably not do the best job speaking about it. One thing is that we do have an outer facing website, offers different resources for our teachers, and we do our best to keep that updated frequently. So we have a few of our coaches that help support us in making sure that it's updated. So for example, one of the things that happens on that website is that our coaches themselves are doing a monthly communities of practice open for anybody to attend. One of our last sessions was on using WIDA and then working with our EL learners. And so that then goes into, we upload onto our YouTube, and then we make sure that that's on our website. So anybody can then go back in, and it's like a bank of resource and videos to be able to go in for those professional developments. Then we have several other links that are there that's available. And so that can also be found on the website as well.
I refer to my letters manual frequently, not just with facilitation of letters, but also just to remind myself of, certain things when I'm presenting or whatnot. So I refer to that a lot, the manual, and I'm assuming most of our coaches do too on a regular basis because we always want to bring the work back to the science of reading. That's a good resource for everybody if they've been through letters. My particular go-to, and I laugh about it, but I also tutor students with dyslexia, and so on my on the side. And so because I really can't stop working with kids, it's the only way I can continue my sanity in life. And so I refer to the ABCs and All Their Tricks by Margaret Bishop a lot because I have kids that will be like, but why is that? Why is our English language doing that? And most of the time I know, but there's times when I forget. And so I can look it up really quickly and be like, oh, this is why the letter is a schwa because of this or whatever. And I can teach the kids. So that's a real handy one that I think, and it would be useful for even early childhood teachers because it just tells us of all the tricks of why the language is the way it is. My other go-to is Equipped for Reading Success by Dr. David Kilpatrick. They're short. There comes like a little screener for phonemic awareness, but also they're short little 10-15-minute exercises you can do with all age kids to work on phonemic awareness. And so I really appreciate that. And that is another go-to for me. And I think all educators should read Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. Fantastic book and resource as well. Toby, do you have any other? What are some
Yeah.
go-tos? You have different ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one that I absolutely love, and I think again it comes back to the schwa because I know Denise Eide loves the schwa, but the Logic of English has been a great resource. I'm really getting into the Literacy Foundations for English Learners by Dr. Elsa Cardenas Hagen, and then Speech to Print by Louisa Moats has been a great resource, especially in conjunction. I mean, it's like letters on Red Bull. I don't know, but it helps solidify some of that material. And I'm kind of like Ryan, no matter how much you come back to letters, like you still pull away another different layer that you're like, oh wait, here's this one missing piece, or here's this extra piece I can do within that. So those are some of mine. And I think my final one that I really appreciate is the Reading Comprehension Blueprint by Nancy Hennessy. Has been a great resource as well.
We'll have to make sure and provide a reading list for our listeners as part of announcing this podcast. Thank you both. What a rich library that we can begin to build as early childhood educators, seeing the value of this in the preschool side too. Thank you.
And I was just thinking, okay, listeners, this is coming out during spring break time. So get your books and go somewhere nice and read. So for our next question, we want to know a little bit more. How is the implementation of structured literacy impacting student outcomes across New Mexico?
Yeah. So, it's been one of those interesting things. And so we're very excited for MOI data. And then now with some of that change of do we use December? Do we use January? And so for us collectively, just for ours, we decided to go with the January data. And so really what we're seeing is that at least our 72 school sites that we can actually see that we know we have supports going in. that we're having a lot of progress, especially in making those iStation goals. There's that growth percentile is really in some instances, in some grade levels, some school sites, we're seeing it's exceeding the growth goal. And then in some, we're seeing that it's like closing that gap. So we're getting closer and closer to meeting or exceeding that goal. So to be at mid-year and seeing that already happen is really exciting, especially if historically the schools have not seen that trajectory. That's been one of the exciting pieces for us.
Toby, I just have to say before we even move on to Ryan, because I can't wait to hear what Ryan has to say, but to know if we haven't seen those shifts, we haven't seen that movement, everything that we're putting into New Mexico around letters, the science of reading, structured literacy, coaching, listen to what you just said. You're seeing that movement. We're closing those gaps. Like, oh my gosh, I just have the chills. I'm excited. Like, I just want more. I guarantee everyone wants more of that, but we're seeing that. And think about that young reader or those readers that maybe might not have had a chance if we didn't move this way or do this shift. You know, they're having success for them, their families, the educators. So excited. Ryan, tell us more.
So like Toby said, the schools that are really making the most growth are the ones that have really committed to looking at their data. Even when we've had some teachers that were maybe a little more reluctant to look at their data, they're now wanting to look at their data in the mid-year because they're seeing their next door neighbor um, making some great crazy growth with their students, and they want some of that. And so we're seeing that as well. Now our coaches are going in and doing more professional development around, the data. How do we put target interventions for, with our students, and how do we really use that data to design our instruction? I think that was kind of the missing piece, right? I mean, we have all of these assessments, and maybe teachers tend to, because they're overwhelmed, give the assessment and move on and go on their, with their other things that they're doing in the classroom. Now they're getting that time. It's built in because the administrators are seeing the importance of having that time built in for the teachers and the coaches to sit down with them and look at their data. And now they're really able to analyze it and understand it, right? I mean, sometimes we don't understand the data that is being presented to us. And so just having that time built in, I think, has been really important. And then also we do coaching surveys for our teachers as well. So we sent out the coaching survey for this year, for mid-year, last week, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from teachers just saying that the coaching has really improved their teaching practices, and really just having that thought partner in the classroom has really helped them work on their professional goals, and they're starting to see how it's impacting student success. And so that's been really important too, to get that feedback. Once we have that feedback, it really does help the school administrator to think again about maybe reapplying for next year and continuing on this trajectory, so they can reapply every year for the grant and continue that work with the coaches. That's really exciting, I think.
Yeah. And can
It's
I
not
add
like a 1 year and we're done.
It's here to stay,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And I was going to add a piece to just what Ryan had said, going back to that professional development and seeing our coaches doing more professional development. It's not just that they're providing that professional development, but they're also meeting with administrators or that team on a plan on how can we ensure that that PD is being implemented and what's the accountability piece there. And so that's been a shift for us this year as well as working with our coaches.
Yes, that alignment. I think when you both were speaking, in my head, it popped up to the visual that we often use about the value of professional development or professional learning without intentional support coming back into the classroom with coaching. Minimal implementation, right, until the coaching steps in. And so recognizing that in this initiative is heartwarming to us as well. And I appreciate that you moved into how the data is being utilized, the data analysis, Ryan, that you spoke to, making that so meaningful. So I'm going to shift a little bit in the next question since you've addressed that, but tell us a little bit about the research behind the science of reading and structured literacy. We know it because we've gone through letters or letters EC, but tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, what is the research behind this that's making this, I think Toby used like a national wave, you used that term. Why and what is the research? They're both trying to decide who's going to speak to it first.
Gonna say, I mean, the research is not new. It's been 50 years of research. So I think that just finally getting the research into teachers' hands has been the huge shift that we're seeing. And then also the schools that have made that instructional shift, they're showing better data than maybe schools that aren't or didn't make that shift. And so now everyone is wanting some of that. And so I think that the research isn't new. It's just we're getting it out there to the practitioners, the teachers who are out there delivering the instruction, which is where they need to have it. I think once we know better, we do better as teachers always. And so that's what's happening right now. For all the years, I can even speak for myself, maybe the method before for teaching reading wasn't working, and we as teachers would be frustrated. Like, why are my kids not reading? Or maybe you have that 1% or 2% that read anyway. But how do you get to those students that are struggling? And that's always been, I think, what teachers have been asking for. And now that they have the access to the research, and how, now that we know how the brain reads, right? We're not built to read. And how we can develop that in students, we're getting smarter about the products that we're choosing, and also how we're delivering that instruction to students. Really looking at word recognition and reading comprehension, looking at Scarborough's reading rope, making sure that we're have those components in a good lesson plan to make sure we're meeting the needs of students. What were you going to say, Toby? Because we weren't sure who
No,
was gonna talk first.
yeah, no, and I was trying to decide how would I want to answer that question. So thank you for going first, Ryan. Let me build upon some things. But and I think also when we think of our state and we bring it back to our state, like we have so many languages. We're such a language rich state that I think about how our brain learns to read. So just even knowing that knowledge of once we've created that pathway, um, when we learn another language, that pathway to read is already there. So we're just using, certain tools, certain strategies, certain practices that theorists for language development have come up with. Then it coincides with that wealth of knowledge, like that 50 plus years for the science of reading. And so just what that comes together and it culminates. And then I know we've mentioned, like, also I think about our families, and I think it empowers not just our teachers and our administrators to do better, but it empowers our parents to be able to have a more of a voice to understand, okay, something's wrong. I might not know what's wrong because my child can't read, but something's wrong. So we have Sold a Story in that podcast with Emily Henford. And then we have The Right to Read, that film. And so just those tools, I think, also help empower that as well. And you have different organizations out there that support that work. In our state, we have NMTED, we have the Southwest International Dyslexia Association. So we have different organizations that are supporting and doing that work as we go through.
Thank you both. Just as you were speaking, I was thinking too, there was a phrase in that the documentary, The Right to Read, about reading and writing is a human right, right? A civil right. And that was so profound to me, that it's not just that we're shifting to the new and greatest, right? Because it really isn't new. You both shared with us, it's a body of research that's over a 50-year span. But when we look at it, shifting our perspective and looking at it from, it's not just something new that we're top down being forced, but it's really recognizing that for every student, that it really is their human civil right to be able to read. And so thank you for that.
And it's urgent, right? I mean, we can't keep doing the same thing. We're leaving kids behind. And so how do we provide an equitable approach to teaching to read, or helping teachers learn to teach to read? I think that's the key part. It is. It's a civil right. We need to have a sense of urgency.
And there is that sense of urgency now, and that's what I think gets me really excited. We got to go to the Roundhouse last week, see the initiative and the press conference around structured literacy and what's happening. And, the governor was like, it's both sides. Both sides are agreeing. We don't always agree on everything, but this we're agreeing on. And it's true. We all are here as New Mexico, that we want better for our children. We do want that. And for her to say that, I think was just so powerful, because everyone is behind this. Everyone wants better for our children here in New Mexico, and they're seeing gains already in a short period of time. It's amazing because we have early childhood that's connecting with elementary ed now. Like, we're all connecting, and coaching is at that forefront because that's what's supporting these teachers. They're getting more time to really focus in on their teaching practices or looking at that data. It's not just a once and done, or you can't just like, okay, oh, I did it and I'm done and I'm moving on. It takes time, lots of time, hard work, and effort to learn these strategies and put them into play, and to work with the students and understanding our data and what is our data saying in our classroom. For iStation, if it's ECOT for early childhood, we have to look at our data to know where we're at and where do we need to go with that student and to support them. Learning these new techniques, and even though it's challenging, if you've taken letters, early childhood, or the elementary version as well, the books are thick, right? Like, once and done is never going to be the answer to it. You have to go back and back. And Ryan, I appreciate you saying, I go back to it. I go back to it. Your coaches go back to it. The early childhood coaches go back to it. They're all going back to it because it's so important. That's what we're working at. And those are the shifts we're seeing in our data. And I know our listeners definitely want to know, what is a success story that you've had in your structured literacy program? So maybe both of you guys can share one success story that you guys have maybe witnessed, or maybe a coach has told you.
I have mine, I think. I mean, there's several to choose from. I'm like, what do I want to choose? So in one of our model schools, we had a kinder teacher that was already doing good things for kids, but seemed to have this disconnect. Data prior to being part of the program was usually sitting around anywhere, say 40 to 50% proficient by about mid-year. And I'm going to use mid-year data since we're there. This kinder teacher now has 87% proficient.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Wow.
we're just so excited for this teacher. And the coach called and was just like, I have to share, like, these are the things that are happening. And then teachers that were being resistant are just now like, what are you doing? Like, I'm nice to you and we talk outside of work, but about work we don't collaborate. And now they're seeing this collaboration start to happen. And so that would be, I think, one of my success stories for the past.
I think overall the theme is we're seeing more collaboration amongst the teachers and the administrators at the schools that we're supporting around the data, which is exciting to me. I know that some people get tired of hearing data, but we only know how we are doing with data, right? Based off of data. And so we really do need to be analyzing it. Schools that are doing that and having that collaboration, now they're having more structured PLCs even around really what does that vertical alignment look like from grade to grade. And now they have the information to discuss and to collaborate with other teachers. And the ones that are really seeing their efforts are growing their students. Essentially, we're seeing a huge shift in their data, taking one strategy and not giving up on it and continuing even just that component of it. They're seeing that it's working. And I think that is exactly what teachers need to see, right? To reinforce that, hey, I am doing what is good for kids and I know how to do it and I'm confident. And then let me pick another thing that I want to improve upon. And so that's what I think the coaching and having that thought partner is really important. But as far as the schools, I think overall, what we're seeing is the collaboration amongst their staff building. They're no longer working in those silos. They're working together as a unit. And that's been really exciting to see.
to know that you're not alone. You can go over to your neighbor next door, or if it's across the building, and have that. And I love that you said, like, now they're wanting, like, if they maybe weren't sure about it, right? But now they saw that teacher that's really like dove in right away. Yes, I'm going in for it. And they're seeing their data change and shift that much. And they're seeing like it's working. Yeah, they're definitely going to be talking after school, being like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, how's that going? And so to know that there is that collaboration and that partnership that's happening for the schools. I mean, think about the climate that that's bringing for children, and teachers. And I guarantee we're going to see that retaining teachers because of these great things that are happening within coaching, data, understanding our data and looking at it. And so I definitely can see a shift happening for New Mexico, where we're not going to see maybe as many teachers maybe leaving the profession. They're going to stay because they're getting that support that they need even more. And thank you so much both for sharing those success stories. And I guarantee there's even more. So I'm like, oh man, after the podcast, we're going to have to talk even more. I want to know more about it.
Thank you. Ryan, I just wanted, you said something about seeing the vertical alignment, and that stood out to me as well, too. Oftentimes we hear teachers, as students move from one grade to the other, well, you didn't send them to me prepared for the grade and the instruction I have to now engage in. But seeing that vertical alignment, that building, it's something that I think the governor mentioned at her press conference about why can't we be ahead of the game? Why can't our students be ahead of where they need to be? With this initiative, it sounds like that is start to happen, that students are arriving at the next grade level, or ahead. Wouldn't that be incredible to see that happening because of what we're doing?
I really do think that if we continue the trajectory that we're on, we are going to see that. We just need to also realize that it's going to take some time, right? And
Yes.
that it's not a quick fix. And I know that sometimes everyone wants to see that, but it really does take 3 to 5 years to really see the fruits of your labor.
Thank you so much. And that leads into the next question, which is, what are the upcoming goals for New Mexico with the Structured Literacy Initiative for, say, the 24-25 school year?
We're currently in the process of just meeting. We've engaged in a couple of strategic planning conversations, just seeing, where are our next areas of supports? What is this going to look like? And so we don't have anything definitive, unfortunately, right at this moment. We're hoping to, within this next cycle, be able to get a little bit more creative in how we've rolled out the application process. We're calling it the onboarding process. I don't know that we're married to the term yet, but the onboarding process with our administrators, with our school districts and the LEAs that we're working with, because again, we want it to be that partnership. And again, that understanding of, like, even though I'm not directly teaching that child in that classroom, they're still my child. They're still a child that needs to learn how to read. And so having that collaboration, having that support system built in, is really what we're trying to be intentional about as we continue to revamp the process that we've been in.
Ryan, anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I will say that, because we don't know exactly what it's going to look like for next year, because Toby and I are always wanting to continually improve. And so we'll look at something and be like, yeah, it worked, but how can we make it better for next year? Or we didn't quite hit the mark where we wanted to with whatever it is, the support or whatever that we're trying to offer. But I will say last year was our pilot year. We had 36 schools that we supported through the grant. This year we have 72. So we doubled our efforts, but we really tripled the support that was going out to the teachers. And so that is magnificent in its own right. But I anticipate that we're going to be able to reach more as the years go on, through legislation and other things. So as they start going to through their legislation meetings and whatnot, I think that clearly structural literacy is not going away. I don't think so. And we hope not. That's also always determines our fate, right? And so that's kind of where we're at right now. But I do think that now that we're working with New Mexico PED and really collaborating on that strategic plan, we have a lot of people involved in the process. And so everybody's not only getting their voice heard, but we're all working on it together. It's really is a collaborative effort, and it's something that I think is really exciting, because being an educator for over 23 years, that may not have always been what happened, right? And so we're seeing that shift, and I'm really excited to be a part of that.
Thank you. I think one of the most exciting aspects about this is the commitment to the longevity of making this initiative successful. As you said, oftentimes it's okay, what's the new thing this year? What are we expected to do this year? And then it changes. I don't see this going away either. And so we'll have to circle back in 5 years and see where we are, right, with this the structured literacy initiative. So just to get to the last meaty question, most of our listeners are early childhood educators. So how do you see structured literacy being embedded into early childhood?
Well, I see it being embedded in early childhood through oral language development and through intentional play, right? So all the skills can be taught intentionally, because there is that vertical alignment from preschool to kindergarten. And then all that research, like Aries phases, and what does that phase look like? Where should kids be at preschool, right? They are able to, they have that building blocks. If those could be taught, then kindergarten can really work on some of those other skills and getting kids to begin to read. I go back to the reading rope, Scarborough's reading rope, and really looking at word recognition, really targeting phonemic awareness, even the upper strands where students are obviously not reading themselves, but being able to be read to, read alouds are really important. And being really strategic about the read alouds that you provide. Maybe it's not so much anymore like, well, I really love this story, so I'm going to read this to my kids year after year. But what is the intent for the reading? Is it maybe there's alliteration in it, and really highlighting that with the kids, or maybe there's rhyming and really working on that with the kids, or maybe it's just rich in vocabulary, or even just providing kids with background knowledge is really important. So I see early educators as being the bricklayers, if you will, or the concrete of really being able to introduce kids to the world of reading by doing it orally and really being intentional with their practices, because our brains really aren't wired for reading, but they are for oral language. And we know that based off the research and off of the brain scans that have been done. And so really just working on that oral language with students would give them a step up. And then also, Toby and I were talking about this a while back, but also really working with families and how can they also help prepare their students. Rich conversations at the dinner table, or, reading to them, that kind of thing. So I know Toby will mention that, but I really just see that early educators are the foundation, and really making sure that when they're teaching that they are looking at the rope and how can they do a lot of the rope orally with students.
And just to connect to what Ryan's saying, yeah, that conversation we had about the families, we were talking about the Linsa study out of letters and just some of that component piece. And at the school site, when I was at the school a couple of years ago and working with my pre-K teachers and my early childhood educators, like, we were constantly having family engagement. And so it became not just what are these engagements doing and how can we make them purposeful? And so it was even, I remember one of the engagements, my teacher at the time, she set up different centers. And so the students came in. And so it was just exactly what Ryan was saying is they were doing intentional learning through play, and they were connecting, whether it was letter identification, whether it was letter sounds, whether it was being read to and getting asked specific comprehension questions. It was that whole round of piece, but it allowed parents to come in and actually observe and get modeled for them what this could potentially look like at home, because the follow-up was like, oh, so have your mom or dad or brother, sister, whoever it may be, grandma, grandpa, read this, but ask you questions. Or if you have a question, you ask questions. You guys ask us questions all the time. And so it was that kind of back and forth. But again, it was all built around that oral language. because oftentimes, and sadly, what happens is I see it with my niece and nephew all the time, is that they have an electronic device put in front of them and that oral language stops. The development there just ceases to exist. All they're getting is input and there's no output happening. And so, really, I think being able to expand and being able just to be intentional in those conversations and to help our families with that would be huge, because that investment helps us in our investment at school in that intentionality.
Thank you both for your insights into the application in early childhood classrooms. I know that as we move forward, there is some concern that within intentional explicit instruction, that we're losing the foundational principles of early childhood education, right? And question whether it's developmentally appropriate. So I think you both addressed that very well, and hopefully will allay some of those fears that our listeners may have related to structured literacy in early childhood.
So now it's time. Who is the real Rianne and Toby when you're not wearing your structured literacy coordinator hat? And so our first question for you guys is, what is your favorite book to read to students? And I'm going to add something a little different for Toby, though. I'm going to say, what is your favorite song to teach your students? They're thinking pretty hard over here.
So my favorite book to read to books, I guess, would be anything from Lois Lowry. But I really love the classics, like Dracula, Frankenstein, because I taught upper levels ELA. Little kiddos, I have my own favorites too. Hungry Caterpillar, I love that story. I can work all day on health and why it's important to have healthy snacks, because we can see what happens to the caterpillar when he doesn't and he just eats a bunch of junk. And then there's math involved in there too. So I can, I love the Hungry Caterpillar for many reasons. But honestly, in the upper grades, which is where I mostly taught, anything like any of the classics have been really good, because I really like Socratic discussion with students.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that too, Ryan.
My favorite book for me that I've ever used to teach with my students, it's interesting. I think mine was more younger, but I've used it with older students. It was actually Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and I used it as a music teacher because we used it to create our own songs, our own chants, our own raps, if you will. And so that's what I loved about it, is the evolution of it could be limitless. So our students could be as creative and free as they needed to be within that. And then in sixth grade, one of the books that I just came to use was The Watsons Go to Birmingham in 1963. Was a great text to use just for social justice, social awareness. There's just a lot of different themes, and here our students don't necessarily see themselves in that area when we think about the Deep South. And so I think that changes some of those perspectives and opens some of that conversation about those similarities. So for me, there was that. And then favorite song, since you threw me for a loop there, is actually, I have two and they're equal for me. America the Beautiful is one that I love to teach just because of the different layers in that. And then the Star Spangled Banner actually is probably one of my favorite to teach, just because I get so sad when I see people not know that. You go to sporting events, and it used to be one of those things where everybody would just start singing. It wasn't just whoever's been selected to sing it and you sit there and listen as a concert. It was that whole unified communal piece that you all brought you together. And so I always appreciated being able to teach that and be able to have that sense of togetherness and community.
I appreciate your books that you guys were talking about that are your favorite. And Toby, yep, I definitely had to put you on the spot with that one. So thank you for answering it.
Great. Well, I think we jumped into the second question a little bit earlier, but is there anything you'd like to add as far as a favorite resource that would support early childhood literacy? Is there one that you might want to share with our listeners?
In this one, I think it's great because, especially if you're coming into some of those pieces of, you can utilize it with kids, you can utilize it with parents, you can utilize it with teachers. But How Your Brain Learns to Read by Denise Eide is a great resource that I found. It's interesting. It's very simplistic in its thought, but it's also very deep in its thought and the way it's designed. And so I see the applications across multiple grades, but for sure I can see that because I know we've talked about some of the hesitancy, I think, in early childhood to just fully step into that realm of the science of reading and structured literacy. And so I think we feel it's going to take away some of that autonomy and that just developmental layers and appropriateness that happens. This, I think, helps to curve some of that and just is that educational piece and does it in a way that's multifaceted.
I really like, and I think it would still be valuable for early childhood educators, Making It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown and other authors, who I can't think of who the other authors are at the moment. That really makes you think about, well, for one thing that sticks out to me, like rote memorization and why maybe that's not the best way to to learn something. I really think that it brings to light or what the brain really needs in order to learn or make it stick, to really be in the, in that long-term memory. I think it's really an interesting read, and it's a quick read. But I think that that would be really helpful for anyone who's in education, because it might make them look back at how they teach and what they're asking our students to regurgitate even, and really just what is the purpose of learning, and really what is the purpose of assessment.
Thank you both. I'm sure we'll all be writing those titles down. Rianne has shared also that you do have a book list already prepared, so we'll look forward to sharing that with our listeners.
This is our next question for you guys. What was your favorite grade and why?
So the funny thing about me is that I didn't really like school. And here I am as an educator. So that's a hard question for me. I did really appreciate my kinder and first grade teachers at John Baker, Jeff Diamond and Mrs. Koskovich, because, it was school. I mean, it was the first time of having to be in school, right? I didn't go to preschool. And it was a welcoming and nurturing environment, and I felt that I was really cared for. I think that was really what was important at the time. Um, I don't really remember how I learned to read, but I was always a good reader. I think it was memorization, to be honest. I don't remember learning phonics because until I became Wilson trained, I didn't even know what phonics was. But when I really decided that I liked school, it was when I was at the early college academy and working on something that excited me and engaged me, really is what it was, and working on my nursing degree. So that would be the only thing I can talk about. I'm sorry. I was always a good student. I didn't like school that much.
Ryan, but I think that might speak to a lot of our listeners, though, too, that maybe they didn't like school as much either, but now they're back in education and they're teaching and trying to give different experience to children. I appreciate what you said about, the grades that really did speak to you and why they did speak to you. So thank you for sharing that. And what about you, Toby?
I have fond memories, I think, of every single. On the opposite of Ryan, I love school. I think I could do school 24/7, even now as an adult. And it is my happy place. So much so when I was 2.5 years old, I was begging my mom to let me go to school. So I started preschool at 2.5. And so for me, I think probably one of my happiest school years that I can remember was actually second grade. I had Mrs. Wilcox. And part of the, and again, I guess I have these full circle moments that I never knew until now as an adult. I'm looking back all these times. She was also the second grade teacher for both of my parents. And so when they were in second grade, so it was great to have their teacher and to see that relationship and that connection that she still had, to the point where all of my cousins were all, my mom and her two sisters each only had one boy, so we're all only children. It was that interesting connective piece of, when my cousin got married quite a few years back now, but she was the one teacher that everybody was like so excited. We help her get out of the car. We help her just do, like, it's Mrs. Wilcox. She's our teacher. And that was, even into our 30s and 40s, she's still our teacher. And so that's just one of those. But I feel that way about, I would say, 95 to 98% of my teachers. I have that feeling about them, about that relationship. And I think it goes back to what Ryan said, in just how the safe environment made me feel, and how they treated me, not necessarily as a kid, but how they just treated me as a learner. And so that, I think, was the impactful piece for me.
We're seeing each other as we're doing this podcast. And I was just thinking, what a powerful question. And just to see everybody's face on the screen, how it shifted when we started talking about this. There's a sense of yes, reminiscing, but just a calm and feel good feeling that comes across everybody's face, just to reiterate the importance of our teachers and the impact that they have on our lives. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Terry, for bringing that forward, because it is true. So teachers, thank you for everything that you're doing out there, and keep making those connections and supporting our learners and supporting them growing. I do think, Ryan, when you said also about like when you got into like a degree where you were like really learning, that's where that shift started to happen. So like think about sometimes for kiddos that are, and if they're listening too, we might have students listening. Just know that, when you have that passion for something that you want to learn, you're definitely going to dive in deeper with it and have that connection and want to know more. Oftentimes too, some of our colleagues that I talk to, they're like, first, like, I didn't really like reading as much. Like, it wasn't something I did for fun. Now they can't stop reading. You know what I mean? They can't get enough of their reading. And so I just think about that too, that there is that shift.
Wanted to say that on our website, there is a Google form attached that if any educator wanted support or just had questions, that they could use that form, and then one of us would reach out to them. So just to know that there's a lot of support out there, and a lot of people willing to work around with literacy concepts, because we all have that common goal of wanting our students in New Mexico to read.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We're all here to help you and support you. So never feel alone. And if you do, reach out to any of us. We're all here for you guys. But we want to say thank you guys so much for your time today and being here with us. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Well, Katrina, as usual, our podcast and our conversation with our guests was so invigorating and also informative. Really appreciated the perspective that Rianne and Toby shared with us this morning about structured literacy in New Mexico. But I think what was most important to me was seeing the alignment with early childhood education. We know there's been a concern around the state whether implementing structured literacy will impact early childhood programs and maybe take away from the philosophical foundations we believe in, such as play, that young children learn through play, and also whether it's developmentally appropriate. But I think our listeners will get the sense that no, it is totally developmentally appropriate, and that structured literacy can be explicitly implemented during play.
Yes, and I agree, Terry. I think that there is just so much that I took away from this podcast with them. And just one of the things that I really took away is, oh my gosh, they first were serving 32 schools and now they're serving 72 schools and they're growing. And, coaching is that piece that's making the difference for our teachers and our children here in New Mexico. And so it's great just hearing what they're doing at that elementary level, and how it is connecting with what we're doing in early childhood. The other thing that I was really excited about was all the resources that they had to offer. There's so many different resources and books that we can be reading to learn even more about structured literacy and the science of reading, and how do we, really help the instruction in our classrooms and putting that forward into practice. And so it was just wonderful, but I just can't get enough of it. I know what I'll be doing over a break or the weekends. I'm going to be reading a lot, Terry.
Me too, Katrina. In fact, I had to jot down the names of some of those resources that I want to start reading. Just really enjoyed today's podcast.